Here with my friend, Professor John Eastman, Chapman University School of Law professor. How are you?
I'm well, Mark. How are you?
I'm very, very well. First of all, John Eastman, tell us what's being proposed here.
Sure. Tim Draper has sponsored an initiative in California using the state...
Tim Draper, an investment capitalist.
Investment capitalist. He runs an entrepreneurship university up in the Silicon Valley. Terrific guy. Anyway, he thinks California has become ungovernable because it's so large. And so he's proposed to split the state into 6 different states, Central Valley and Northern California and the Bay Area and L.A. and Southern California, what have you, that more accurately reflect economic and industrial alignments in the state, and then make each of those states more manageable, more governable, so they can adopt policies that make sense for them.
All right, let me slow down here. Let's slow down here. I know, but we're talking about senators, too, so that has more than the state's interest. It has a national interest. So what are we going to get, 12 Democrats out of this?
Well, no, if you look at the partisan leanings of the 6 states, right now California has 2 Democrat senators, so that's +2 in the national total.
And will for as far as the eye can see.
Yeah, that's right. There will be a total of 12 that come out of this if it's approved. 4 of them are very solid Democrats. 2 of them are solid Republicans, so you're still at +2. And the remaining 6 are kind of up in the air. It could go either way. So there would be 6 additional ones that are highly competitive. Democrats could pick up some of those, and therefore they think they have something to gain out of this. But Republicans could pick up those as well, and so they may well think they have something to gain out of it as well.
But you're not doing this just because you enjoy social engineering. You're doing this because you believe the Republicans will come out and net ahead.
Well, I believe that the people of California will get a better handle on accountability in their government. And if
well, now, wait a minute. We could have 50 senators from California. That I'm concerned about the nation, quite frankly, as you are. And so I'm not interested in sending a bunch more Democrats, even if they can manage their little fiefdoms better. We're talking about sending these people to the Senate.
That's right.
And the U.S. Senate.
And if out of 12 we end up with 6-6, that means the Republicans have had a net gain of 2, because right now we're down by 2. And I think there's a pretty good prospect of that happening. And quite frankly, some of these areas might even be +4 Republican by the time we're done with it. Because
no, you're looking at the Central Valley, which has taken a hell of a beating by the Democrats and these liberal judges. You're looking at San Diego and Orange County, which could be Republican, even though it's trending Democrat, it still could be Republican. And you're looking at the Northern California, which could be Republican as well.
That's right. And I think Tim Draper, who sponsored this, hopes that the Silicon Valley would vote more sensibly as well. Although because
don't hold your breath.
The Bay Area, that's a hard sell.
Yeah, between what, communist and Democrat, or what? I mean, they're pretty out there.
Exactly.
All right, so this is now you'll need, so it just got approved for the ballot, and you need over 800,000 signatures. Are conservative organizations, conservative groups going to get behind this?
I don't know. I think Tim has said in public that he's willing to underwrite the cost of getting the signatures necessary to put this on the ballot. I suspect if people kind of look at this closely, that the activist groups will realize that this is a good mechanism for getting control of their government again, and they might get on board. The real interesting question is what happens if it does get on the November ballot and passes?
Well, this is why I brought you here. I wanted to ask you this question. It passes. That's not the end of it, is it?
No, that's only the beginning.
What happens next?
Because the states can propose to divide themselves, and we've had a couple of instances in our past. For example, Kentucky is a split off from Virginia. West Virginia is a split off later from Virginia. But there's a 2-step process. The state legislature has to approve, and that's kind of under Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution, and then a majority of Congress has to approve as well. And it doesn't. The state split doesn't take effect if a majority of Congress doesn't approve. In fact, over 100 years ago, California proposed a split into 2 states, and Congress never acted on that. So we remain one state, 150 years later.
Well, let's go through this again. So the state legislature has to approve. Does the governor?
No, the governor, and it's unclear. As you know, Mark, the word legislature in the federal Constitution sometimes means the physical legislative body.
Right.
Sometimes it means the legislative power, and it's ambiguous on which Article 4, Section 3 applies. We would contend that it means the legislative power, and the state Constitution of California has explicitly reserved the ultimate legislative power to the people by acting through initiative.
And the legislature in California is overwhelmingly Democrat, and you got Mr. Knucklehead as governor. So once you get this past the ballot initiative and people vote for it, they're going to block it.
Well, only...
Hold on now. Unless they think they might be able to pick up a seat here and there.
No. I don't think they have any role at that point, because the people through the initiative have exercised the legislative power. And it will then go directly from there to Congress.
All right, so it doesn't go back through the legislature. It goes directly to Congress from the ballot.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And it's a simple majority vote of both houses of Congress.
It's a simple majority vote of both houses of Congress, and not even referred to the president.
And is there potential for judicial mischief?
Of course, there always is. The court.
But what would be the basis for it?
Well, the court could say an initiative is not the legislative power or the legislature, and therefore it has to go through the
That's exactly why I keep coming back to that, because
And we've looked at that. I think that's a wrong interpretation of the clause, but this has never been litigated, and that means it's an open field. We would fight strongly on the right of the people to make this basic legislative determination on their own. So that's one. But the interesting thing about this, Mark, is there's a fallback mechanism in this initiative. I mean, the real goal here is to have smaller government at more local level. And that's going to happen even if the Congress doesn't approve that those local governments be called independent states. They get organized as states for internal purposes of California law, and a lot of power gets devolved to those local governments, and that would begin operating as states unless and until Congress actually approves that they're states. And that
Professor Eastman, don't rush. Hang on. We're gonna take a break and come right back. Okay?
All right.
I don't want to rush through this. We have a little bit more to go through. I'm with Professor John Easton. You're listening to Mark Levin. Professor John Eastman, Chapman University School of Law. I love that school, Chapman. President John Doty there. John, so Congress has to approve. Does the president have to approve?
No. This is just like a Congress proposing an amendment to the Constitution. The Constitution specifies that comes from Congress. It's not subject to It's subject to bicameralism, but not to presentment to the president.
So the whole matter would probably wind up in the Supreme Court, unfortunately. You agree?
I do. There is a close call whether the consent of the legislature of the state means the California legislature or the legislative power. And then, of course, if Congress doesn't approve, then it will just sit there on the desk in Congress. And there's a window built into the initiative asking Congress to issue, to decide one way or the other within a certain period of years. But that's only half of the initiative, as we were talking about right before break. The other half of this is until Congress does approve, or assuming they don't approve, we've devolved power away from the centralized power in Sacramento.
So let me put it this way: you're going to have 6 states, whether they're recognized by Congress or not. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much. They would still be operating under a single state constitution, but it would be a constitution that allows them basically home rule in these new regional governments.
Now, these regional governments, would they still be answerable to the government in Sacramento?
Well, technically, but only things that are of statewide concern, and the government in Sacramento could not impose taxes or regulatory fees on the local governments or the people in those regional areas unless they paid for it, which doesn't happen. So there's going to be a tremendous free hand for people in these regional governments to chart their own course and have a government that's much closer to them, and then therefore, at least theoretically, much more accountable to them.
So you're trying to find a way to liberate the people of California who want to be liberated from what's going on in Sacramento.
Exactly, and chart their own course, and then compete with one another. If one of these new regions or states decides to have a very high tax and high regulatory set of laws, people will flee, and they won't have to leave the state now. They can just go to the next region over and have more sensible policies and still stay Californians. And then those governments will have to compete with each other for the business, for the people, for the voters, what have you, based on that regulatory and tax policy that the new states put in place.
There was a proposal some years ago for 5 states. How did you all come up with 6?
Well, you look at the demographics, you try and adjust for the politics of it, because we know that it's a political process to get it approved through the Congress. And if either party, major party in the Senate, for example, thinks that their ox is really being gored by this, they won't do it. They both have to think that there's a reasonable prospect they can have some advances for their side here. And I think that we've done that. And then you also have to adjust to take account of kind of historic affiliations, the county lines, who kind of thinks of themselves as regions. The Central Valley is a good example. The Northern California counties are a good example. San Diego and Imperial County and Riverside and Orange County being different from L.A. County, that's another good example. So then we drew those lines around those kind of natural affiliations.
800 and some thousand signatures. That shouldn't be hard to get in a state with over 30 million people, should it?
No, you figure a buck or $2 per signature if you do a paid signature gathering campaign. There was a large volunteer effort on another referendum that just gathered 620,000 last month for a referendum that only required 500,000, and they did that largely with volunteers. So it is possible, and the sponsor of this has made clear he's willing to put in the financial effort to get this thing on the ballot.
And the bottom line is Congress has to approve this. So I suspect it's not only convincing the people of California, or enough of them, to vote for this, but convincing enough members of Congress to support it, even those who might be concerned that it could flip heavy Democrat or that libs think they may lose a seat or two.
That's right. And the thing has been structured to make that at least a possibility. But it doesn't turn exclusively on that. If that possibility doesn't ever materialize, the Part B of this initiative plan still allows these regional governments to take shape and to start operating to get some sense back in their governing policies.
Yes, and that's very interesting because if the ballot initiative passes, is that then a fact?
Yes.
I mean, other than a weird court decision, that would be that, right?
That would be that. It would amend the state California Constitution to provide for that devolution of power to these regional governments. And they would be the kind of primary government for the multiple counties that form part of that new prospective state. And they would stay that regional government, even if the prospective state never materializes in a formally approved by Congress state.
Is Draper a conservative, a libertarian, a liberal? What is he?
He's an entrepreneur, largely a libertarian, I suspect, up in the Silicon Valley. And I think a lot of people in the Silicon Valley, and quite frankly everywhere else in California, are just growing tired of having so much entrepreneurial spirit and industry and being blocked at every turn by the tax and regulatory policies coming out of Sacramento.
Well, you know what? Maybe so, but they vote heavy-duty Democrat time and time and time again. You got a lot of takers in that state.
Yeah,
and that population is growing, and people who are takers are actually moving into the state, and people who are producers are getting the hell out of there.
Well, they are, and you can, proof of that. Just have any of your listeners hop onto the U-Haul website and look at the price of a truck from L.A. to Austin, Texas, and then exactly the same truck back the other direction. It's about a third cheaper.
All right, so I may have a lot of listeners who are very excited about this, and then I may have a lot of listeners who are saying, gee, this is quite the crapshoot. And your answer to the people who say this is quite the crapshoot from a national perspective is what?
Well, from a national perspective, yeah, it's a crapshoot. You got to get it through Congress, and that's why Part B.
No. I mean a crapshoot in terms of you look at the net Republicans that may come out of this.
Yeah, no. The thing is structured so that there's a decent possibility there would be net increase for Republicans. And if Republicans fall flat and can't do anything, as sometimes they do nationwide, then they would lose some seats. That makes it possible to get through Congress. The Democrats are going to need to think that they have, if they're good, have some prospect of picking up here as well. But
why? If we have a Republican Senate and a Republican House, why do we care what they think?
Well, you're right. And so, if we have a Republican Senate and a Republican House, then that means things have turned the tide in this country, where I think it's likely out of the 12 senators in California, there would be at least 6 and perhaps as many as 8 Republicans. That would be a big pickup. Even 6-6 split would be a pickup.
Well, I don't think they'd all be up for election at the same time, would they?
No, they wouldn't. You would have it rotating in. The first one, when they first became states, all of them would be up for election at the same time. Some of them would undoubtedly end up on 2-year terms, some would end up on 4-year terms, and some would end up on 6-year terms.
Right.
Just like we had when there were new states created, back at the very beginning.
Okay, John, this sounds very, very interesting to me. If I lived in California, I would probably support it because otherwise I don't see any hope in California.
Yeah, no, California is broken and it's getting worse. And as you said, the takers are moving in and the producers are moving out. And unless we figure out some way structurally to stop that from happening, it's going to be a calamity downward cycle. And I think this is a very bold move, but I think it's the right one to kind of get some sense back into this state.
All right, my friend. God bless.
All right, Mark. Too good talking to you. Thank you.
All right, you too. That's Professor John Easton. Good man. Solid conservative. Constitutionalist. Known him a long time. And he's been involved in many, many important pieces of litigation. And he is at Chapman University School of Law. Curious to know what you think about that as well.